Airlines.
800-452-1075. 800-452-1075. That's 800-452-1075.
Hello, listeners out there. It's the Gut Check Project here with your host, Dr. Ken Brown. I'm Eric Rieger, and of course on Gut Check Project, you check your egos at the door and nothing's off the table. This is episode number 13. Dr. Brown, what's up?
Number 13, I missed that music, man. We actually had to travel a little bit, so we missed last week. We did a rerun on that one, but I love that music. I just get my little groove on whenever I hear that. I'm like, oh, we're gonna have some fun today.
Yeah, it reminds me of, you say you miss that music. The music that I remembered when I was younger on Thursdays was the Cosby Show. But we're not going to be putting anything in anybody's drinks, so it's just me and you.
It's a great way to open the show.
Yeah. This is Gut Check Project. Nothing off the table.
Nothing off the table. We're going to talk about, oh boy. Yeah, it's not about sweaters anymore, is it?
It's definitely not about sweaters. So let's touch on that. Last week, we've been trying for 2.5 years, 3 years to get into the Institute of Functional Medicine show. And this year, we got our first chance to be a part of it. I would say...
being...
Atron Teal. And we were joined by Mike Logsden, and I think the three of us unanimously decided that not only was a great exposure for Atron Teal, we connected with people that have been using Atron Teal for a long time. And on top of that, I think that we found a lot of new fans who just basically wanted new explanation on how Atron Teal could fit into their practice. They loved the fact that it was less expensive. It was an all-natural solution for bloating, and then of course in Canada we can say IBS, and
A. You always have to say A afterwards.
A.
IBS A,
but not IBS-C and IBS-D. It's IBS-A.
A.
But it was. What do you think? I thought that the exposure to that level of really involved and caring practitioner was huge.
Well, so the IFM. This was the International IFM meeting. We've been trying to get in there for a long time. What I learned from that was, holy cow, there are a lot of very smart doctors who are now adopting this functional approach.
Yep.
Because the system that we have right now where we just treat diseases, it's breaking the bank completely. It is a broken system that needs to feed on itself. So these are a group of doctors that have flown in from all over the world, and they are trying to help people at the base level so that we don't have to get to a point where they're being prescribed opioids or where they're being prescribed this, and we're going to give you this thing. And so have a booth there with Atron Teal and then have all these doctors that already knew about us was such a cool experience.
But speaking of all of those physicians that were there, think about some of the other people that were there talking about their new delivery systems, or for instance, Kiran Krishnan. And just so everyone knows, we're going to do a quick reset right here, if you don't mind. Last week, we didn't have a show. So because we were on the road and we didn't have the ability to do a remote show because we were doing a completely different setup. That being said, Kiran Krishnan of Megaspore, or actually it's Microbiome Labs, the makers of Megaspore, is a fantastic probiotic. And we ended up doing a recording, which will be released later this month, of us interviewing with Kiran. Those kinds of innovative minds, that's what's all over the IFM. It's new ways to deliver health and wellness at a savings to the patient using, in most cases, natural approaches, and they work. And they have science that backs it up. That was really super exciting.
That was so cool. So first of all, thank you, Kiran.
Yeah.
For taking us out to dinner.
Yes.
He took us out to an amazing Peruvian Asian fusion restaurant, and we just had a blast.
We did.
And I love being around like-minded people. An entrepreneur who's a scientist. He's a microbiologist in his training. When he came to the house, we did the podcast. He kicked some crazy knowledge. Absolutely phenomenal as to why you should be using a spore-based probiotic and not a traditional probiotic based on plausible science replicated in the lab. That is what is amazing. He is all about, well, that makes sense. Let's test it. He is a researcher first, entrepreneur second. And that's kind of the model that we have with Altron is because really we've got some science to back it. And that's why we developed it. And that's why I think that we're going to be able to possibly work together to really help a lot of people using the combination of the two.
Yeah, he's pretty amazing. And the way that he talks about science, it's like he's talking about a friend.
Oh, he's just, I mean, he describes you're going to have to listen to this episode because he gets so into it that it's so cool. But we come from bacteria. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah.
And we have lost sight of that. And we have developed a world that kills what he calls the holobiome, which is a term I've never heard. He said, we're a rainforest. When you take out the canopy, things die. And we have systematically been destroying our own God-given reason why we're here, which is our microbiome. And we're all about the microbiome also, talking about polyphenols, talking about probiotics, protecting the microbiome. A recent study just came out. I just saw that yesterday where they were looking at how the microbiome affects aging. And if you have a healthy microbiome, it's an anti-aging situation.
Yeah, man, that's and really when you start digging into the science that Kiran, I'm always butchering his name. So Kiran uses to back up why spore-based probiotics are not only more efficacious but actually more natural. And then you begin to look at how the microbiome itself benefits from having a spore-based probiotic make its way to the colon. The mystery is no longer a mystery. It makes sense on why you need to care for that for your body. Yeah. And you're basically a vehicle for bacteria. And if you're keeping them healthy and happy, you're going to be healthy and happy.
It's the signals. We talked about that. Well, we've always talked about the microbiome on this. We talked a few episodes ago where in TCU they did the study where they injected people with lipopolysaccharides and they showed that the neuroinflammation created impulse problems. They led to anxiety, all kinds of stuff.
So you just brought up LPS. That's exactly what he talked about was a better marker. Remember that? Instead of just using C-reactive protein and other markers to find true long-term inflammation in order to find out if you could heal the gut, LPS was a better marker. And you could speak to this. Is that something that current practitioners through traditional medicine are using?
No. Traditional medicine does not look at LPS. I do have a science article today where we're going to touch on that a little bit.
Okay.
Because remember we talked about the leaky gut leading to leaky brain?
Right.
Well, I've got a really cool article just published this month, 2019, June 2019, where we're going to look at how CBD and a cannabinoid-like endocannabinoid called PEA, actually some really cool science on that. And that's what we always come back to. It's bridging the gap. We're going to try and take some science and bring it over here. Kiran was talking about that the whole time. He goes, this doesn't make sense why people are doing this with probiotics when we should be doing this because this makes a lot more sense. We don't want to ruin that episode because I think it is one of the coolest, funny, nerdy episodes where we get way into it because just like you talk about, he talks about these spores like they're his little baby. And he's like, they're going to do this and that. And I mean, he loves those things.
Yeah, he does. And you're right. We don't want to spoil that episode because we will release it here in a couple of weeks. However, on today's episode, we have an incredible guest who's got a great journey and a story on how he got to where he is today. That's Leif Harrison. Now, currently, he is an executive for director of operations for Elixinol. And we know him quite well from that, but he's got so much more depth than just somebody who lucked into being in a frontier industry. In fact, one of the coolest things about Leif and the fact that he's in the hemp industry is this is a man who has a military service in the Naval Academy. He was in Annapolis. He was trained by the Army on becoming a parachutist. He's got tactical training, not only in the Navy, but as a civilian. He worked at Boeing. I'm not going to ruin his whole biography and we'll let him do it, but the man has got lots of exposure from the military, from a large corporate structure, and now working in literally the Wild West of a very legitimate industry, which needs legitimacy. Right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why we have teamed up with Elixinol, because I really think that they are just a step above everybody else. We've had Joy Beckerman on that they brought on, and she is a procedure and policy expert. Chris Husong with the marketing, he's been involved in that. Listen to those two episodes. We're going to have Dr. Paul Blair on where we're going to talk about the science PTSD and all that. What we have with Leif is this business background. Really smart guy coming from incredible background to say, no, you need to legitimize this because this is real. It's not going away, and people need this. We talk about healthcare dollars. We talk about functional medicine. CBD is not going away, and we just need legitimate companies producing great products.
Yeah, without question. So stay tuned. Leif will join us in the next half hour. And, well, let's see here. Real quick, paying the bills. Go to lovemytummy.com if you weren't at the IFM conference and you would like to learn a little bit more about Atrantil. Lovemytummy.com/Spoony. Use code Spoony. Save some money, and you'll see everything that Mike, Ken, and I talked about while we were down in San Antonio at the IFM, and we will definitely be back next year. That was a fantastic get-together.
That was really cool. But seriously, I want everyone to commit to this. Please go to that website, support everyone, because this supports Spoony, this supports functional medicine, this supports Atrantil, which we're also doing research. We're teaming up with people. We're meeting all kinds of stuff. So lovemytummy.com/Spoony, SPOONY.
Last thing before we get into Dr. Ken's Corner is going to be, we keep getting responses of people who have now decided to subscribe to iTunes. I do want to remind everyone you can also subscribe to Gut Check Project on YouTube, where you can enter again. And of course, if you subscribe, screenshot that you have subscribed, go ahead and leave us a review. And in July, we will be awarding at least 5 winners a free month supply of Atrantil, as well as KBMD CBD of your choosing, either natural or cinnamon flavor. And funny story about that real quick before I finish out how you can enter. And that is, we have a friend whose son, he was a bull rider, suffered a brain injury and has seizures now. So this is completely anecdotal. I don't want to make a huge claim here, but however, has been struggling on what's the correct diet recipe for myself to not have these issues. Has a neurologist that he sees out of Wichita Falls, and here recently began using KBMD CBD. Just last night, that mom of that young man let me know that he doesn't go anywhere without his KBMD CBD now, and he doesn't have nearly the exacerbations of his seizure activity.
Absolutely love that. Love hearing stories like that. These are real. This is not a subjective, oh, I feel a little bit better. This is not a placebo effect. This is somebody that has objective data showing that they have improvement in something. Not a disease claim. Everybody gets so scared about saying that. But what we did learn from Get On is that you can say what it helps, but not the disease. So if we can decrease neuroimpulsivity, which leads to a seizure,
sure,
that's really the marker that we can do, and that's the kind of science that we need to get out there.
Absolutely. So just to continue, if you want to win your own free Atrantil and KBMD CBD, subscribe, screenshot, share, write a review, send a notification to us that you've done that at kbmdhealth.com or gutcheckproject.com. Just go under Connect. You'll see in the drop-down menu, you can let us know that you have subscribed, and you will be entered, and then you can be a winner. That's it.
Everyone wins.
That's everyone wins. So, Dr. Brown, what's going on?
Not much. So, we talked about the IFM. It's really cool. I have not been sick in years and years and years, and I finally got like my first cold / I don't know what it was. It was bad. In years, and it's fun. So I did not go during the proliferative stage of the virus. I made sure that I secluded myself. Fortunately, it happened on a Friday, and I could kind of hide and let that go. But then kind of developed a little bronchitis afterwards, and then had to go do a show where you talk all day for 3 days. It was so neat.
Yeah, it's a perfect recipe.
Yeah, we were in beautiful San Antonio for IFM it was held at the JW Marriott. Great little Airbnb we stayed at. That was cool, like right off property. So that was neat.
Yeah, it was nice. You kind of scheduled the wrong day. So
there's a little funny story to this, and I'm going to let you tell it because I'm a little embarrassed. So I'll throw it back to you, and you can describe what happened.
So basically, Ken, you told me that, Eric, I'll meet you down there. I'm flying. I know you're driving. You're taking the equipment down, and I did. I went and checked in, and then I went to the location where the home was for us to stay. And I rang the proprietor, and just as you said I should, she's incredibly friendly. And she said, "Hey, how you doing?" It's like, "I'm fine." And so, "This is Eric. We're going to stay at your house." And she said, "Yeah, I can't wait to see you tomorrow." And I said, "Well, that's cool because I'm here today." And she couldn't have been more accommodating. She laughed. She got everything ready within an hour. Home was beautiful. So we had a great stay, but she was able to scramble around and get everything up and running. If you've never done a home share thing, it's a lot like Uber. I mean, VRBO and Airbnb are both super easy to use, and huge house, very, very comfortable, and not really that expensive for us using it for 4 days.
Well, considering that if you're going to stay in a hotel or something, and because we're working a convention, we've got a few people, me, you, and Mike. It was pretty funny though, because that's what happens when you've got two people that are busy doing a bunch of other things and just sort of, oh yeah, I have to book that place. Yes, okay, yeah, blah blah blah, and you move on. And so it probably would be better if we just had somebody to be handling that kind of stuff for us. So
yeah, well, it's okay. Everything turned out well.
Oh, it turned out perfect. And so we went there, beautiful San Antonio, and like I said, Kedan took us out to a great dinner, and we had a wonderful time. That's actually where I did my training. So I'm very fond of San Antonio. That's where I met my wife. That's all that stuff. So going back there is always fun. I got a lot of people there, but that was a great conference. That was awesome. While I was there, quick update on the family. Carla actually had a tennis tournament, and she killed it in Dallas, in the Dallas area. She won the whole thing. So she's starting to really hit stride right now. We're really proud of her. And, she's realizing that there's a lot of both physical skill, but when you get in tennis, you really have to put the mental with it because you're out there alone. And she's really hitting her groove right now. And we're going to be having some national tournaments coming up where both kids are now playing on the national level. So I'm very proud of Carla. She did awesome. Lucas appears to be going through a growth spurt because he did absolutely nothing. He just slept and ate. So,
I don't blame you, Lucas. And good job, Carla. Nice work.
So, and then, of course, myself got hit with the cold, and, Loida basically has to make sure that the kids get to these tournaments. So how about you guys?
Everything on our home front is great. Marie's business with her wellness center continues to grow. And Gage he's 17, had his wisdom teeth taken out. I guess that was 2.5 days ago. And he's recovering, but he's doing well. I mean, we expect good things, and I think that he'll be back to his normal self in probably about a day or two. And then Mac, we had several yards here in the early summer that need new sod around town, around Decatur. So Mac went out after basketball practice on, I guess it was Monday and Tuesday, and basically he feels like he's a new entrepreneur because now he's walking home with $200 a day throwing sod.
Throwing sod.
Yeah.
That is not easy. I did that when I got my first home in San Antonio. Yeah.
So he's pretty pumped about that, and he had a little change in his pocket and not enough time to spend it. So that's the best way to do it. And for a 15-year-old, that's not too bad.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
No, that's it, though. It seems like they were moving on with the summer.
Yeah, that's cool. We quick shout out to Melanie Avalon and Jen Stevens because I did the intermittent fasting podcast again. Love going on their show. Had a great time talking about all kinds of stuff. One of the things that we did hit on, which I actually had to do a little research, was the carnivore diet.
Ooh, tell me about it.
Well, the carnivore diet, it's basically meat.
Oh.
I'm going to eat meat.
All right.
And while I was doing some homework on that, you actually pointed Jordan Peterson out to me.
All right.
Yeah. How did you find Jordan Peterson and the work he was doing?
Originally, actually, it was that's a tribute to Gage. Gage is a big, he just spends his time reading about different things all of the time, and he finds Jordan Peterson to be somewhat interesting just as a personality himself. It just so happens that Jordan and his daughter, I believe, his daughter definitely suffers from some autoimmune issues.
Yeah, I think she's been the most outspoken person with this.
Correct.
Yeah, Michaela, right?
That's I believe that's her name.
Yeah.
And so she and Jordan both had at least some type of autoimmune issues. They both reset and decided to go and try the carnivore diet. They had been reading about it, and according to them, they don't have those issues anymore. And I think that he's 18 months into it, or something like that. It's around that timeline. I can't remember exactly, but I have heard his interview on Joe Rogan and a few other different podcasts but Rogan is the one that sticks out the most because he just has the longest format.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to hear someone make that transition. I love vegetables. I love fruits. So I don't know if the carnivore diet is for me. But
Did you see the Joe Rogan Sean Baker one, the orthopedic surgeon that's doing the carnivore diet as well?
No, I know that he's quite outspoken also. I'm not really on Instagram much, but I've seen that he's pretty prolific and basically showing that he likes meat.
He likes meat. Similar thing where he's an orthopedic surgeon, really smart guy. He's doing strictly meat. He's eating quite a bit of meat. So I had my first patient on. We had a long talk, and we've tried a bunch of different diets, still struggling with some stuff. And so I put him on a carnivore diet for the last 2 weeks. He feels good.
Really?
Yeah. So my knee-jerk reaction would be like, no way, like everybody else. Like every other diet that's out there, as a traditional doctor, you look at this and you go, what? Paleo? No. And then you go, oh, wow, that's kind of interesting.
Sure.
Oh, keto? No. Now, keto, I've tried keto. I'm mostly paleo. Tried keto. It's difficult for me to stay on. What I do, and we talk about this on the podcast, so that comes out next Monday, I believe.
IFP, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Intermittent fasting podcast. That she's going to release that next Monday. We talk about all this, but the problem that a lot of people do, like I do, is dirty keto. You think you're keto, and then you kind of cheat, and then you ruin everything. And I kind of basically screwed some things up doing that. So we look at these different diets. Well, the initial reaction is, oh, the carnivore diet, that's crazy. I mean, meat's bad. You have all this meat in your colon, and John Wayne died with 20 pounds of meat in his colon, whatever. Completely untrue. And there are certain primal lineage people that really survive purely on meat during certain times of the year. The Inuit Eskimos, for instance.
Right.
They're not eating vegetables.
No.
It's just strictly meat. And then Sean Baker had some examples of some tribes in Africa that really only have meat, and they are extremely healthy. So I'm looking more into it, and that's how come Melanie wanted to talk about it. So we got into that a little bit. That's the first time. I love going on podcasts like that where I have to do a little homework, kind of like doing this thing. Every single week, we try and do a little homework. We try and bring everybody up to speed, and so that we can all get a little bit better at something. And that's just another example. Looking into it. I got my first patient experience with it. Let's see what happens.
Hey, if you've tried the carnivore diet out there and you're a listener of GCP or you know someone that has, shoot us an email. I'm really curious to see what it's like and what that transition is like. And how do you feel? How long did you do it? What is it like? Whenever you talked about the keto diet and doing dirty keto, I can certainly relate. And I didn't realize that I was relating in the same way. I feel like I'm avoiding carbs, I'm avoiding sugars, but something that I wasn't taking into account was I was offsetting some of that by consuming probably more protein than I should have. And you can probably speak to this. If you overconsume the protein in terms of the protein ratio to the fat, your body can actually just go through gluconeogenesis and basically use the protein and turn it into circulating glucose. And you can kind of throw yourself out of keto itself, right?
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, but Dr. Sean Baker actually talks about this. He's a power lifter, holds a couple records in his age group. Mm-hmm. And he got in arguments with other doctors where they said, no, you won't have enough glycogen in the muscle to do this. Well, the fact that you break down the protein, the amino acids, and then you form glycogen in the muscles, that's fuel. So people do keto, but they take too much protein in, and then you actually store glycogen in your liver and in your muscles, and then when you work. In fact, when you and I were fasting, mm-hmm. we did a little experiment with you where we were actually working in between patients.
Oh, yeah.
And we did we have a keto mojo. We checked your ketones.
Right.
Ketones were up. Blood glucose was, you run
59,
low. Yeah,
58.
59, 58, somewhere around there. And I'm like, hey, let's try something. Why don't you do a bunch of squats?
Yeah.
And what happened then?
I think we checked the glucose again, was it 10 minutes later? And I was at 76. Is that correct?
Yeah, your glucose went up and your ketones went down a little bit because you burn the ketones as fuel and you mobilize some of the glycogen in your muscle.
Yeah.
So a lot of this physiology takes place and people don't realize that that's actually going on.
I did remain in technical ketosis because that's 0.5, I believe, on the Keto Mojo.
100%. And so one of the things is, did you actually just burn some ketones or did you mobilize the glycogen? I think a little bit of both.
Both, probably.
I think both. Yeah. And so that kind of stuff goes on.
The interesting thing, too, is kind of motivated by intermittent fasting, just the idea of it. And you know this, most days I only consume bacon and eggs for breakfast. And so I typically stay in moderate ketosis in the morning until we finally get to lunch. Man, that's the first half hour. That was really fast.
Holy cow. I got so much more stuff to talk about.
Leif's going to hop in, but we're going to get to the study and run it by him and see what he thinks and try something a little bit new doing that. But Anything to add before we take this break?
I just want everybody to take this break and go to lovemytummy.com/Spoony.
Yeah, you should totally do that because there's some everybody wins there, don't they?
100% winners.
All right, we'll be back with Leif Harrison here in just a moment. Stay tuned. Gut Check Project, episode 13.
Dr. Ken Brown here, host of Gut Check Project with my co-host Eric Rieger. Eric, we've been seeing Mojo guys over there and over here at Spoony talk about Atrantil for bloating. I've seen in my practice that Atrantil is a whole lot more than just a bloating product.
Yes, it does a whole lot more than just fix bloating because of the polyphenols that you find in Atrantil.
You're exactly right. The polyphenols are those molecules that we find in the Mediterranean diet. It makes vegetables and fruits very colorful. What are some of the things that these polyphenols do, Eric?
These polyphenols can actually stop inflammation. They can help you have more energy. They can help you with anti-aging. And polyphenols are great for athletes.
It sounds like it's going to help a whole lot more people than just bloating. Tell me how everybody should be taking Atrantil.
If you want to dose Atrantil, it's 2 capsules 3 times a day, basically with your meals. But if you aren't bloated and you just want that polyphenol intake every day, 2 to 3 capsules a day will work for you.
Go to lovemytummy.com/Spoony.
Now you can fly anywhere in the world and pay discount prices on your airline tickets. Book a flight today to London, Paris, Madrid, or anywhere else you want to go and pay a lot less guaranteed. Call the International Travel Department right now at Low Cost Airlines.
800-452-1075. 800-452-1075. That's 800-452-1075.
Never Forgotten Apparel is more than just a premium women's and men's clothing line. It's a movement to remind us to wear American-made and serve those who serve us. Our heroes. Never Forgotten Apparel gives 20% of their total sales to nonprofits that support homeless veterans and off-duty firefighters, and 50% to individual veterans and firefighters in need nationwide. Check out neverforgottenapparel.com. Use promo code MATT, M-A-T-T, and get 15% off your purchase.
All right, we're back for the second half hour. It's the Gut Check Project, episode number 13. And we were talking as we closed out the first half hour about fasting. And then I had to ask Leif, don't say any more, because he chimed in and said, I tried some of that fasting and I was going to think, how long did you do it? Was it like 4 or 5 days like I did? Because that was really hard. And he said, no, I did one that was how long?
40 days and 40 nights.
That is.
Is that the Daniel fast? Which one is that?
No, that was just a irresistible call by God to fast.
Really?
Yeah. So I just did some quick internet research on like how to even attempt it. And I settled on, it was all water with a little bit of organic fruit juice in the morning and a little bit of organic veggie juice at night. And I just ran with that the whole way.
40 days?
Yeah.
That's the longest I've heard anybody doing anything like that.
Looking back on that, this is probably maybe 4 years ago, literally not possible without God.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think a human being can just sit down and knock it out on their own.
Wow. Did you have a regimen of prayer that you were doing with this?
Yes.
Kind of like a Ramadan, the way that that is done?
Yes. I think it was probably 2-3 times a day. I had some note cards of prayers that I'd written down in advance, and I just worked through those with issues I and my family were dealing with at the time, and we just worked through that the whole time.
That's amazing. When you look at fasting, it's in every single religion, really, if you look at it.
Oh, yeah. The only other person I can remember that's even come close to as long as Leif is Rita Marie Lascano.
Oh, that's right.
She went to, and for almost the same same motivations. She went to I don't call it a resort, but it's basically a place that they facilitate people that are going to do long-term fasts, and they give them coaching, they give them support, they make certain that they don't have to move too much while they do it, and they make sure that they have water, that they're hydrated. But I can't remember if she said she did 4 weeks, 5 weeks, something like that.
Did you have a die-off period or some period where you went through like a keto flu or that stuff that people talk about?
So I don't have any terms for it. but you go through multiple stages during the whole process. So my experience was probably about every 4 to 5 days, you would switch from one aspect of it to an entirely new one. And so it started out with incredible headaches, and then those passed. And then this is my understanding. I don't know if it's valid or not, but it appears that maybe there are a bunch of heavy metals stored up in your body, and that in the course of an extreme fast, they're being released and hopefully flushed out. But apparently they tend to then collect in the larger muscle groups. So you go through things like extreme thigh pain, extreme back pain, that type of thing. And that's the only correlation I can make to why you get those kinds of pains. But then again, over the weeks of the fast, they tend to be the focus, and then they tend to move on from that.
You're really selling this. This sounds so fun.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's not something that can be done on your own, in my opinion.
So this is, holy cow!
That
So
is tough.
I've done a 5-day fast. You've done a water fast,
Yeah.
5 days. I've done the prolonged fasting mimicking diet. I've done fasting. In my opinion, is the greatest life hack you can do. What you did is like Navy SEAL stuff. That is tough.
Yeah, it's in my opinion, it's God inspired and God supported. So I don't think it can be done on your own. And for the scripturally sound people out there, I'm well aware that the Bible speaks to this as not something you brag about. I only share it because that was just a process I went through, and maybe somebody else can relate to that.
I think
No, I
it's an
think it's
incredible journey. I mean, and I don't think you're bragging at all. I mean, it's an experience for sure.
Oh yeah, no, you're being very honest. Headaches,
Yeah.
muscle aches, tough. Can only do it if I focus on prayer. No, I think that is. There's a lot of people that need to reset, and I do the fast. I fast for the 5 days usually, or I'm trying to do it 4 times a year, and I find a lot of habits that I've developed that I go, oh my gosh, that's more of a habitual thing of having that snack or having that glass of wine at night or whatever when you start paying attention to it.
And one surprise at the end, I didn't need to come off it. I mean, when I finally hit the goal, I could have kept going, but I stopped. But I wasn't expecting that part.
Wow.
Man, that is very impressive. And you said a word that I like is reset. So it sounds to me like, Leif, you were inspired to do it, and you had your own motivations. One of them that you didn't specifically mention, but of course, the body being a temple, it would only make sense. What type of, away from the spiritual benefits, what type of body improvements did you notice at the conclusion of the fast? Did you feel healthier? Did you sleep better? Did you find, and maybe even during the fast, you began to just have better periods of rest and clarity? I'm just kind of curious.
I don't know that I can speak to any of those specifically. You know, what little reading I did on it leading up to it, and then trying to kind of understanding it after all that happened, was it, you know, if losing weight is a goal of your fast, then I'm under the impression that you really don't want to be in caloric deficit more than about 300 calories per day. When you're doing it, and at that level, you tend to compensate for that deficit. Your body tends to burn way more fat than switch to muscle for calories. When you do an extreme one, that sort of 90-10 ratio becomes more like 50-50. And so you take hits across the board.
Yeah.
So it literally came out to, I think I was 39 pounds lighter after 40 days.
39 pounds. Wow.
Right. But I lost a lot of muscle mass in the process.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a sacrifice though for going through it. I mean, nothing like that comes easy, but I do think that there's a spiritual reset. There's a family interaction reset.
Yeah. Did you do it with your wife? Was this you alone?
No, I told her in advance, and then because I told her I just kept feeling this pull and this, not preoccupation with it, but it just wouldn't set aside. And then I targeted a date for the future to start it, but I was just like, I think I'm just going to start now. And so I just warned her, because this would be I didn't know what was coming, and it would affect, the family for a good 6 or 7 weeks. But I basically just started it about a week or two after having it come top of mind, and just did it.
That's impressive, because let me tell you what, I've had periods during those 5-day fasts. Each one had different issues, but I wanted to day 3. I'm like, okay, I'm done. I want to stop now. This is, I'm hungry.
Definitely.
Did you go through, so both Eric and I experienced, there is a hormone called orexin that when you get to a certain point, your body's telling you to get out there and go do something. Did you have a surge of energy at some point, day 4, day 5 of the first?
No, but I appreciate that people who do shorter fasts go through experiences like that. So I think mentally I was in this for the long run, to the best that I could be. So I wasn't thinking of it in short chunks. Plus I was dealing with the fact that sort of various kinds of pain were coming and going, and that would really absorb a lot of the moment. But I do know that people who do 3-day, 5-day type runs, it's almost, I don't know if it's almost like a runner's euphoria, but there are things that can kick in during that time that can make it pretty special, and it's hard to access those other ways.
Isn't that fascinating? Because mentally, your body knew that it had to do this. So the reason why this actually kicks in, it's an evolutionary thing, where if you're part of a tribe and you need to go out and get food, you haven't had food by day 3 or 4, you get this surge of energy. And we all did. I woke up at 1 a.m. and just started cleaning a closet. And it makes sense because this hormone kicks in, because it says, look, you need to go get food. You need to go get a surge of energy. When you get beyond that, when you get into a longer fast, that ends, and then you're actually in this starvation mode. You actually went to a starvation point.
Yeah, what's also interesting is you think about people lost at sea, all kinds of situations, civil unrest, something where when food and water become an issue, there really do seem to be some hard stops, and hard stops tend to be like 3 days max without water, or you're in serious trouble. But you could go 30 days without food, and so I don't know. I'm sure most people aren't prepared to try to do that, but it seems like physiologically you could do that if you had to.
Wow. That's just impressive.
That's super impressive.
And it's not so much the fast or the duration, it's the commitment that Leif was able to put himself in to see himself.
Well, we're going to get into your background, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And very clearly you're a very mentally strong person, but you don't own it. You say, no, I can only have done it with prayer and through God.
Yeah, it was a irresistible pull. It was never something I thought about. It just happened, and then about 2 weeks later, I decided to just go for it.
You know what? I'm going to be more like you from now on. I'm going to start with this also. Can you stand up for a second real quick?
Uh-oh. There's an irresistible pull here.
There's an irresistible pull. We're going to take a quick picture. All right, that's good. The reason why I just took a picture, because I want to be more like Leif. Well, Amazon just launched a brand new thing. I think it actually started yesterday.
Uh-oh.
Called Style Snap. And you can look at somebody, and here is a picture of Leif that I just took right there.
Yeah.
And then Amazon will build your outfit for me. It's called Style Snap. So
somebody has to.
I know. So I can get a... there we go. I'm going to get a Tommy Hilfiger shirt that I can get from Amazon. So basically...
My wife's been trying this for 7 years, so leave it to Amazon to fix that problem.
Yeah, and then I can get some Kenneth Cole pants, and I will look exactly like you. So it's called Style Snap. It's interesting. So Amazon has not done very good about breaking through the clothing market. I saw a news article on it yesterday.
Yeah.
Just came out. So you can walk around the city and be like, that person looks cool. Take a picture, and then just order the whole outfit to your house right there.
I don't know if that's cool or creepy as hell.
It's creepy.
Yeah. It's cool as a tinker.
Yeah.
That's
I could see me at day 7 looking just like that, be like, no, my muscles, my head hurts. Screw this. I'm going to go eat.
What if you take a picture of somebody who's really, really stacked and it doesn't show his shirt, it just has a bunch of weights for you to order? Or a treadmill or something like that.
That'd be awful.
Mails you a blender and some protein powder. A couple of videos.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet. Leif, do you mind sitting in while we attack this week's research topic?
Let's do this.
All right.
All right, so every single week I always try and pick up something that's relatively new that I find interesting, and most of the time, it gets really sciencey and really geeky. So I try to dumb it down, but this is really cool because a few weeks ago we talked about leaky gut, and a lot of my colleagues in the traditional medicine space, they don't even acknowledge leaky gut. They don't even say that leaky gut exists. They say that there's no intestinal permeability. We really do know that there's a lot of evidence out there. Mm-hmm. The article that we described that time was leaky gut, leaky blood-brain barrier.
Right.
And now we have some evidence that Alzheimer's and dementia can actually be caused by intestinal health. So this article just came out. It was published in the Inflammatory Bowel Disease, June 2019.
Very recent.
Very recent. And what they actually looked at, these researchers, some really cool stuff. It comes out of the UK. And they looked at, it's actually one article including two different studies. One, an in vitro study, which means they do things outside of the body in a lab. And then they use that knowledge to piggyback it on an in vivo study. And the in vivo is when you look at humans and you look at certain end outcomes. So this is really cool. And what they looked at is that we all know that the tight junction in the intestines, it's a selectively permeable barrier. You have to be able to absorb and take in calories. And, unfortunately, we're talking about fasting. There's a lot of people with a lot of intestinal disease where they fast even though they don't want to because they're not actually absorbing all the food that they're actually taking in.
Right.
So in addition to CBD that we always talk about.
Right.
There are other endocannabinoid-like compounds and the definition of them, and we've talked about that, like riduzone is one of them.
Right.
But another one is called PEA or palmitoylethanolamide. And this is an atypical endocannabinoid that is actually found in food. So it's found in soybeans, it's found in eggs, and our body actually produces it. It increases your own endogenous anandamide levels, and it actually binds to certain receptors. So a little sciencey, but it makes sense. So this article looked at CBD and PEA. PEA is one of those molecules that, depending on how you want to use it, but it is an entourage molecule, so it actually works together with CBD in your own endocannabinoid system. So they have shown that PEA can bind to something called PPAR alpha, which is just a receptor similar to an endocannabinoid receptor. Just keep that in mind.
Okay.
So this group had previously shown that inflammation actually causes an increase in the permeability of the intestine. So these guys are on the forefront of leaky gut and have always been on the forefront of this. They looked at how CBD in previous animal models could actually help this. And they published this big meta-analysis looking at animals on how CBD and PEA can actually correct leaky gut. Based on this, they went down this path, and this is the study that they actually just published. So when we had Kid on the show, he geeked out like crazy.
Right.
So
Yeah, he definitely did.
this is my geeking out because this justifies a lot of the stuff and why a lot of the reasons why all health begins and ends in the gut. Why we've become sicker as a society. And we're going to talk about that Chris Kresser article that you got from him, and it makes total sense now. So the in vitro part of this is that they took intestinal tissue, human intestinal tissue, and they soaked it in these inflammatory cytokines. So these are cytokines that your body produces when it's exposed to toxins, specifically like TNF-alpha, interferon gamma, and things like that. They showed that this inflammation caused an increase in leaky gut. And they looked at these very specific cell parameters where they could show, oh, look, this size of molecule came through. And they did it in a very elegant study.
So does this tend to be outside molecules penetrating or inside materials leaving?
So what they did is they soaked the tissue in these inflammatory cytokines, and then they used immunofluorescence to show that it actually was going through from one side to the other. So inside to, well, technically the inside of the lumen, crossing the barrier into the inside of whatever that they had. And in this case, it was just another medium, but it would normally be crossing into the lamina propria where your body would react to it.
So essentially what you're saying is that particles that shouldn't have been making its way to the bloodstream are now being sampled by the bloodstream.
in this piece of tissue.
Right.
So it's the first time I've ever read an article where somebody looked at this and said, leaky gut does exist. When you cause inflammation, this actually happens.
Okay.
So then they added PEA,
Okay.
the molecule that is a cannabinoid-like receptor that is found in a full spectrum hemp product. So it's going to be one of the entourage molecules there.
Mm-hmm.
And they showed that the PEA markedly decreased the penetration of these molecules.
All right. It's good.
So then they said, okay, well, that's objectively kind of cool. So then they blocked the receptor that PEA binds to called PPAR alpha. So they did that with another molecule. The leakiness continued.
Impressive.
So now we know. So we sit there and we talk about where's the science in the CBD and cannabinoid industry. There's people like this publishing this and nobody's talking about this. Absolutely amazing, because they said, okay, look, it stopped it, then we blocked where it works, and it happened again. Keep that in mind.
All right.
So then they added CBD. This also markedly improved the permeability, stopped the permeability. Then they were able to bind the CB1 receptor, and it happened again.
Okay.
So they've got a molecular model where they showed, oh, this is where it's happening. It actually prevents leaky gut. This, in my mind, proves on a cellular level that inflammatory markers alone can create intestinal permeability or leaky gut. But now we have a mechanism that I can tell my patients, look, this is why I like to use these products in the symptoms that you have. We now know that when somebody comes in and they've got bloating and they hurt, they've got a bad diet, a highly processed diet, and they say things like, I have brain fog, I feel fatigued, I've developed Hashimoto's, I've got this. We know that you've now opened this gate and your body is reacting to the outside world. Specifically, it could be reacting to bacterial components, to antigens, things like that. So many of these people, this is how I got into talking about CBD in the first place, because I was seeing such incredible improvement.
Sure.
I'm like, I don't really know why you're getting better. Now we have a reason why.
Don't you feel like that these levels of validation in terms of discovering what the what the mechanism of action is, in part is one of the key pieces that universally the hemp industry just needs for the validation? And actually, it's not even about the hemp industry. It could be the diet industry. It could be anything where there's applicable beyond anecdotal improvement. It's just, how do I piece together the science to show that what we're doing is going to actually work? And I think that we can do that with studies like this.
When you have a study like that where the plausibility of it makes sense, and these guys clearly are deep into the weeds and this kind of stuff. This is their passion. And they've already done meta-analysis on animal models. So they kind of had a pretty good idea. Look, we just need to prove it on a cellular level. So then they kicked it up a notch in this same paper, which is fascinating because it's basically two different studies.
Right. Yeah. It is pretty fascinating.
Then they decided, okay, this is cool. Nobody's going to believe us. Let's see what we can do in humans. So the same group took 30 individuals and gave them high-dose aspirin. Aspirin in itself can actually create, it's an inflammatory thing. We know aspirin creates ulcers. I'll see people that come in with GI bleeds and, they're on aspirin. And aspirin does some good things, but it also increases intestinal permeability.
Okay.
So the way that they proved this is that they got people, they gave them aspirin, and then they did what's called a lactose mannitol test. And it's an interesting old test that mannitol is a very small molecule, and it'll go through and be absorbed, and then you pee it out. Lactulose is a big molecule, and technically you don't absorb it, and you'll poop it out.
Right.
If you have intestinal permeability, that lactulose mannitol ratio comes closer. So you start peeing some lactulose out.
Right.
So they gave aspirin until people started peeing lactulose out, which I thought was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a good baseline for dumbing things down, and I think I followed that.
Sweet. I like that. They did reference, this is kind of funny, they did reference other science articles as to why they use aspirin as opposed to other things, and they referenced a few trials in Europe where people tried to give them straight lipopolysaccharides, which is bacteria, and people went septic. So they're like, no, we can't do that. So although this is not an ideal test, it's the closest you could get to something like this. So once they determined that they had leaky gut, and once they determined that they were peeing out this lactulose. They randomly, this was a randomized placebo-controlled trial, gave them CBD, PEA, or placebo.
Okay.
Now, they did give them pretty high dose, so it was CBD at 600 milligrams and PEA of 600 milligrams.
Per day?
Yes, per day. And they admittedly said it was sort of, we're just going to give them that dose and see what happens. They tried to base it off some of the ratios that they soaked the tissue in the first study, but they admittedly say we're just trying this to see what happens.
They did have a placebo control, though.
They did have a placebo, correct. So they were able to show that the addition of CBD and PEA dramatically reduced the lactulose mannitol ratio.
Okay.
So in humans, they showed that at least with this particular test, leaky gut improved. They took it one step further, and these guys are, I mean, it's like I would have published the first part.
Sure.
And been Eureka, and they do this one, and then they're like, wait for it.
Right.
Let's take molecules which are the exact size of bacterial lipopolysaccharides.
Okay.
Without causing sepsis.
Yeah, it's important.
So they found these dextrans called FD4 and FD10, which I love how science minds works, where somebody just goes, let's get the exact size, because it's a size thing.
Right.
And if it crosses, then we know that they're going to react to the lipopolysaccharide, or they're going to react to the bacteria. These happen to be very similar to the size of E. coli, and I can't remember what I remember what the other one was, but basically very common GI pathogens that we would actually react to. Both CBD and PEA reduced the FD4 and FD10 transfer as well. So people weren't peeing that out. So they were using it like a lactulose mannitol test. And why this is relevant is because this is the first time in humans that two compounds have a mechanism to repair mucosal-induced leaky gut.
That's impressive.
And they believe it's through changes in the tight junction receptors and something called aquaporin 3 in the ileum.
I've not heard of that.
I've not heard of it either. As it turns out, aquaporin 3 is something that in Crohn's disease gets upregulated to try and absorb more water. So you don't get dehydrated. So it's a mechanism that the body knows that the gut is inflamed, and you want to absorb more water so that you can survive longer, because you can go 3 days without water, or if you have too much diarrhea, you'll deplete it.
Sure.
The 30 days with food. So it's an incredible mechanism that you can't beat Mother Nature. You give what the body needs. It's going to do this. So what they theorize that this is why it may be really useful in inflammatory bowel disease. So in my space, this is an incredible finding where we've got, I've got a lot of Crohn's and colitis. I've got a lot of people with that. I can at least look at them and say, look, I think that this might help because of this mechanism. When you look at the research with Megaspore Biotic, it's not a disease claim. You're talking about mechanisms. The mechanism makes sense. And many of my colleagues don't even believe in leaky gut. So it's very hard to actually talk about, hey, I want to tell you about a disease process, and then I want to tell you how this molecule that you probably don't know anything about is going to help that. And this is what we're going to get into in the next half hour. The whole process of how you sit there and educate and where people come. And that's what Leif's going to get into. He's got a great, incredible background. But how do you educate someone on a benefit when they don't even know that the disease exists? That's that white noise that we were talking about.
Well, Leif, we're going to go through your history and how you got to where you are, but we've got just a couple of minutes. What do you think, since you are director of business in the hemp industry, when you hear new levels of validation for the application of hemp products, and it's not just subjective, this is objective data, what does that do to embolden the effort of education in and around CBD?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. One is there's just a vacuum waiting to be filled, bigger than we can imagine, for science-backed argument for what's going on that many, many people can just anecdotally express, but don't know what type of context or framework to put it in. And then number two, it's communication. There's so many people waking up to what this seems to be, and in doing so, few sources to go to, and also buyers in the CBD market needing a a simple message that resonates, that speaks truth above all the noise in the market that is confusing it, and probably in itself based on a lot of nonsense. It's difficult to explain, but it's just stressing that everybody coming in and taking a look needs to be brought in a way that is anchored to truth to the best of our ability, so that they can make the best decisions for themselves.
And I think that, I have a graduate student that helps us, and she sends me articles like this weekly. She's like, talk about this on your show. This is really cool. And this is a thick article. So every time I talk to people, my colleagues, traditional MDs, they go, there's no science behind that. I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah.
I've got thousands of articles looking at the science. You just haven't taken the time to do it because you haven't had a drug rep show up and go, oh, here's the detail piece. We have been Pavlovian trained that we shouldn't look at anything unless you have lunch and you're have this piece.
Well, that is the truth. So that is going to round up this half hour. We're going to be back here in just a moment, but what we're going to bring back is some context behind Leif Harrison. See y'all in just a couple of minutes.
This is the only 24-hour Take Anywhere platform dedicated to food and fun. We're Spoony.
Breaking news this hour from townhall.com. I'm Wally Hines. The world is marking the 75th anniversary of D-Day by honoring its survivors and the fallen.
June 6, 1944, Operation Overlord, the massive Allied land and sea invasion of the French coast that began Nazi Germany's downfall and helped end World War II a year later. To the Americans that fought there,
you are among the very greatest Americans who will ever live.
Speaking near Omaha Beach, the president called them the pride of the nation. French leader Emmanuel Macron said his nation thanks them and the other Allied troops who broke Hitler's hold on France.
We know what we owe to you veterans. Our freedom.
I'm Sagar Magani.
Before heading to Normandy, the president telling reporters in Ireland he's not worried about threats to block his plans to impose tariffs on Mexico.
Told Mexico the tariffs go on, and I mean it too, and I'm very happy with it. And a lot of people, senators included, they have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to tariffs. They have absolutely no idea.
The president says he'll go ahead with those tariffs on Monday unless talks in Washington between the U.S. and Mexico aimed at curbing illegal immigration bear some fruit. A power outage at LAX last night, scrambling check-ins and forcing dozens of flight delays, diversions, and cancellations. Katie Bellum spoke with KNBC TV.
And I was actually in the restroom when I noticed lights went off and then got back out, and all of the restaurants, all of the lights were out. And we got to the escalator to walk down to baggage claim, and that also wasn't working.
Officials say a 2-second power bump caused the airport to go dark about 6 p.m. local. Amazon says it's getting close to starting drone deliveries of packages in the coming months. It promises some deliveries in 30 minutes or less. News and analysis at townhall.com.
Never Forgotten Apparel is more than just a premium women's and men's clothing line. It's a movement to remind us to wear American-made and serve those who serve us. Our heroes. Never Forgotten Apparel gives 20% of their total sales to nonprofits that support homeless veterans and off-duty firefighters, and 50% to individual veterans and firefighters in need nationwide. Check out neverforgottenapparel.com. Use promo code MATT, M-A-T-T, and get 15% off your purchase.
Do you use the expensive blue or yellow pills to charge your sex life? Are you thinking about it? What if we can promise you the same results for less than $3 a pill? If you're paying $20 a pill for the other pills, you're getting taken to the cleaners. Our pills deliver the exact same results for less than $3. You'll save more than $16 a pill for the same results. And right now, radio callers will get 44 blue or yellow pills for $120 with free discreet shipping. You can save more than $700 off pharmacy prices. Charge your sex life now. and save a ton of money. Call now and get your 44 pills and save over $700 and qualify for free shipping. Stop overpaying and call right now.
800-218-6473. 800-218-6473. 800-218-6473. That's 800-218-6473.
Dr. Ken Brown here, host of Gut Check Project with my co-host Eric Rieger. I've seen in my practice that Atrantil is a whole lot more than just a bloating product.
Yes, it does a whole lot more than just fix bloating because of the polyphenols that you find in Atrantil.
What are some of the things that these polyphenols do, Eric?
These polyphenols can help you have more energy, and polyphenols are great for athletes.
It sounds like it's going to help a whole lot more people than just bloating. Go to lovemytummy.com/Spoony.
Welcome back. We are now going to start the second hour of Gut Check Project, episode 13. I'm joined by your host, Dr. Kenneth Brown. I'm Eric Rieger, and today's guest is Leif Harrison. He has quite a journey to his current position as Director of Business Operations for Elixinol. And before we get to Leif, just need to remind you that if you would like to grab yourself some Atrantil, go to lovemytummy.com/Spoony. Use the code Spoony, save some money. That is power-packed with polyphenols, happens to be the only NSF certified for sport indicated over-the-counter product for IBS and bloating. Ken, what does that mean?
Well, that means that we have done rigorous testing on it. So if you happen to be an Olympic athlete, a college athlete, or somebody that wants to make sure that what you take, there was a recent study that just came out yesterday on how they were warning teenagers. Lots of increased ER visits where teenagers are trying to do weight loss products and sports supplements, that they're finding lots of nefarious ingredients in there, pharmaceutical stuff. And that's NSF guarantees that none of that stuff exists. And so that's how come even if you're an athlete, these polyphenols can help you recover. They increase nitric oxide to the muscles, and they get rid of reactive nitrogen species and reactive oxygen species.
There's just a quick story. Did you know last week at IFM there were two physicians that deal with athletes, and they saw the NSF moniker, which doesn't always mean a whole lot to everyone, but when you're with athletes that it matters to, they came up and they said, "That's really cool that you have that. That means that we can use that." And I didn't know. I knew nothing about NSF until I was contacted by the registered dietitian that was on staff from the Oakland Raiders and wanted to know if I could sell them in bulk some Atrantil for them to distribute amongst the coaches and the wives of players. And I said, "Well, what about the players?" And he said, "Well, if you're not NSF certified, there's not anything that we can do with it." And that's really what threw me in. I learned that they have a collective bargaining agreement that includes the recommendations from physicians and dietitians that work in the MLB, NFL, most NCAA sanctioned, schools.
Mm-hmm.
They have to adhere to NSF for cleanliness.
And the other thing, we always like to geek out a little bit, the polyphenols in Atrantil do something really cool related to the endocannabinoid system. Can you explain what that is?
Well, basically, you have your own endogenous cannabinoids that your body uses to stimulate your ECS. And it just so happens that FAAH is one particular enzyme that breaks down those endocannabinoids where they are supposed to function. And if you are light in your polyphenol intake, that enzyme may be a little bit more reactive than you need it to be. And so your ECS, or your endocannabinoid system, tends to not function at its optimal level. So having enough daily polyphenols can actually enhance the ability for your CBD, both your CBD that you may be taking, but as well as your endogenous cannabinoids to work better.
So one of the things we talk about is NSF certification on Atrantil. One of the reasons why we've teamed up, powered by Elixinol KBMD Health CBD, is because they do everything right from the beginning to the end, soil to bottle. They have certificate of analysis, and we have our guest today, Leif Harrison, who happens to be what is your official title?
Director of Business Development.
Director of Business Development. And his pathway to get there is really interesting.
Yes, it is.
And what you're going to find out when we get through all of this is that a company like Elixinol is really finding some very intelligent, very well-rounded people to bring some legitimacy to this industry, which really, although it's been around, it's been referenced since Chinese medicine, 2400 BC or whatever it is that we talked about on one of those shows. Right now, it seems fairly new, and there's a lot of people out there. It's kind of the Wild West. And so they tracked a guy like you down, and we're going to go through, because I think one of the coolest things is your background. We talked about your 40-day fast and the mental discipline, and you're calling by God to go ahead and do that. That shows your character. But where you come from, I think, is absolutely amazing. So
yeah, no. So you filled out a little questionnaire like we ask everyone to do, and you were born in Phoenix, and then I know that you ended up in Annapolis in the Naval Academy. So do you mind, Leif, telling us a little bit about what drove you to join the Naval Academy and what that experience was like in the 80s?
Well, this was the 80s, so I wasn't exactly I was Spicoli without the marijuana. I actually grew up in the Midwest in Ohio, but believe it or not, I grew up a competitive sailor from probably age 8 on, and did well enough that by the time I got through high school, I got enough accolades to actually draw the attention of the sailing coach at the Naval Academy. And at the time, they were like multi-year NCAA champions. So minus the sailing, well, it was probably a combination of two things that got me in. One was the sailing, and one was this was right in that sweet spot of the Reagan Lehman Navy buildup for the 600 ship Navy at the time. So they were just allowing more people in.
Sure.
And
can I ask you a quick question? Because whenever people come on the show, like I'm curious, like when we had Robo on, I'm like, how did you become a professional rodeo guy? How does one get into sailing? And like, where do you start with that?
Right. So my dad was just an extremely gifted mechanical engineer, and through a job change to Ohio, he got surrounded by other high-end engineers who were actually in this very high-performance sailing world. And so they sailed this one type of boat called a 505, and this boat was very technically demanding. And so for an engineer who could like tinker on it at the same time, that's what his draw was. But my parents became very good sailors, and then I was just brought in that world 24/7.
What's a 505? Is that kind of like a catamaran? Or?
It's actually metric, so it stands for like really 5.05 in meters. That was the length of the boat. It was just called a 505, but it was very similar to some of the high performance boats they would sail in the Olympics at the time. And
so you didn't like start out like when you find like when people become Formula One race car drivers, they start out in go-karts and they work their way up to this.
As a kid, you do. So there are many different kinds of boats to fit many different kinds of capabilities and goals. And so you can really progress and sort of graduate almost like, tadpole to minnow, like and going up to dolphin, and get your badges along the way. Sailing's a lot like that. And then coincidentally at the same time is when windsurfing was born. So my folks, again, just happened to be at the right spot where there were less than maybe 8,000 windsurfers in the entire world. This was right at the beginning in the mid-'70s, but they had them. So I learned how to do that at the same time. So I was on these parallel paths. And then again, by the time I got to high school, I was good enough to, finish well at national championships and things like that. And then from that, unexpectedly get the attention of the coach at the Naval Academy. And the next thing I know is essentially I did just well enough on SATs and all the other requirements everybody else had that I had the opportunity to go.
Dude, that is no joke. The Naval Academy is, when you say that, it's just immediately total respect. That is an impressive place to get your education.
Without question. And then, so your experience in the Naval Academy, were you on or competitive on the sailing team for all 4 years, or?
Yeah, I did it for three and a half years. I decided just in the last semester to just shut it down. But that was some schedule. So if you go from being sort of Spicoli-ish in high school, okay, right, to then bang, you're on the other extreme of hard regimen, hard academics, hard hours commitment. I was probably between academics and sailing, I'd be lucky to have a few hours a week to myself.
We talk about it with our kids. Your son Gage is 17. He's looking at colleges. My son's a competitive tennis player. And you start realizing, wow, when you choose to take that scholarship to a college, it's a job. And no matter what it is. Robo was talking about it. He went and did rodeo at his college. Yep. And you're just like, I don't care if it's football, sailing, rodeo, no matter what you're doing.
That's a job.
It's a job. You're committed.
The sport probably took 35 to 40 hours a week just on the sport.
Wow.
My goodness. So your experience in the Naval Academy, beyond the sailing.
What was your degree in?
Yeah.
Math. I got a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics.
That's fantastic. Not being...
That's probably why they brought you onto Elixinol, right? Your math acumen?
I don't think they'd say that.
Well, but probably a lot of your experience along the way is the reason that they brought you on. And I know when you were in the Naval Academy, you did become a parachutist. And so what did that entail once you were trained to jump from planes, and what kind of training did that?
Right. So part of the professionalism, the military professionalism you undergo at the academy are these sort of summer experiences that are required. So if you think of a normal 3 months of summer, they fill it up with 2 in terms of various kinds of training, depending on what grade you're at the academy. So one of the summers, generally one of those 2 months that you have to do is set. You're either on a ship or you're getting a variety of sort of worldwide naval experiences, submarines, aircraft, the Marines, all kinds of things. Very cool. But the other month is more elective. And if you could pass the required tests, you could do things like go to Army Airborne School at Fort Benning, Georgia, where the soldiers go, or you could get scuba training or jungle training in Panama. There were all kinds of things at that time.
This is your elective.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so cool. Yeah. Do I want to jump out of a plane? Do I want to be in a jungle? Do I want to? Yeah, that is cool.
Mine was bowling. So you obviously you selected to go to Georgia and to jump out of planes. What was that like?
It was okay. I mean, it's the Army way, so they took 3 weeks to teach you something you could learn in a week.
So I did, just on a quick side note, in San Antonio, where I said that we were just there, but I did my training, and so we would have to rotate during our fellowship at Wilford Hall and Brooke Army Base, and they would totally crack jokes like that the whole time on each other.
On each other, yeah. It's inevitable. It never stops.
So it's funny because, you go through this training and it's the Army world and you just have to play ball for a few weeks. But it's also the same training that SEALs would go to after BUDS, because it was the only sort of real formal basic parachuting school to go to. Mm-hmm. Like the Army would send their Rangers to, or their airborne guys to, that type of thing. Those guys would just stand there and laugh the whole time. I mean, the Army, sergeants running this program, they didn't even know what to do with them. But this was just some box the SEALs had to check. So normally there'd be, 2 or 4 of those guys standing around, and you wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. But, you're just trying to not let the young soldiers notice these other kinds of guys out there and just try to keep them focused, because they're more instilling for their own people, procedure, repetitiveness, focus, discipline, that type of thing. And, for Navy guys at any level, it was a different experience.
So I'm kind of curious, since you're doing this through the military and doing it their training, do they teach you on different types of canopies? You see the jumpers from World War II, they have the round canopy. Obviously, there's much different, more advanced canopies
So
now.
again, it all goes back to the pool analogy. There's the tadpole badge and the minnow badge and the dolphin badge. Mm-hmm. And with the Army, you start out with that very World War II classic round parachute with a little bit of steering capability. And so in that 3-week program, you get 5 jumps, and you gotta, you want to land as many times as you jump out the door, without breaking anything. 5 jumps got you the sort of traditional silver parachute wings you might be familiar with when you see them on some people's uniforms. Then there's opportunity later, at least on the Navy side, to get more advanced training And then at those higher levels are the more demanding type of equipment, or the super high altitudes with oxygen, all kinds of things. So it's very much a step-by-step process to become an expert in your field.
Have you continued skydiving or anything like that since you left the Navy?
Nope. I ended up just doing the 10 jumps necessary in the Navy to get your gold wings. But afterwards, as a civilian, only one jump since then.
So you're probably not up for doing the squirrel suit or anything else like that?
Or that Red Bull guy that jumped from the atmosphere.
Baumgartner?
Yeah.
Whatever, yeah.
Hey, that guy's fascinating, man. Go easy on him.
Did you see how fast he was spinning?
Oh, my God.
I watched a documentary on that, and then I've saved it ever since. There's something about jumping just flat out from the edge of space that just fascinates the hell out of me.
We talk about this, that I am a... I realize now that everybody's brain is different, and I always reference the free solo guy that climbed El Capitan.
Yeah, in California.
Yeah, and they looked at his amygdala, and it was very small. I'm all amygdala, so the thought of jumping from the atmosphere is just terrifying to me.
Yeah, man, that was crazy though, and I can't remember how many records that he broke. He almost broke the longest free fall. That was like the only one that he didn't. I think he was the fastest in speed. I don't know. I didn't know you were going to bring him up, or I would have looked that stuff up. But yeah, it was.
I did not know that we were going to talk about making fun of Army guys.
We could do that all day.
So after Naval Academy, what kind of industry did you hop into?
So when you come out, you had at least a 5-year minimum commitment to the military as a junior officer. So I had a great opportunity to do a very, very small niche thing, which was cryptology. And that's just sort of a subset of naval intelligence in general. And I had very arduous duties in Scotland and Hawaii. Plus some cool opportunities to serve on British ships and go chase Russian submarines around and do cool stuff like that at the end of the Cold War.
Just to put this in context, so at the end of the Cold War, so we're talking that you were doing chasing the submarines post 88?
Yes, post 88. So I think the Soviet Union fell around, was it about 92-ish? And so I was right at the tail end. So I had an academy experience that was 100% focused on the Soviet Union at the time. Wow. So 100%. That was, 40, 50 years of, probably 40 years at the time of Cold War. So that was the mindset.
I mean, the mindset, 50 years of just ingrained. Like there's people that spent their whole career and that was the one thing that they focused on. Then you come in and there you are.
Yeah, boom. And then you graduate and the whole world changed. So
the dissolution of the USSR, did y'all ever have to keep up with any of the states that had broken away and that weren't Russian?
Right. So, prior to the breakup, this is kind of interesting. So I was a watch officer in Scotland, and that meant that, this was a 24/7 operation of spying on the Soviet Navy and some ancillary things. And in the
rest of the world has no idea this is going on the whole time.
No.
That's so fascinating.
Right. So we had listening posts all around the world, and we were the specialists that manned those listening posts, trying to get, it was called indications and warning. You wanted to, there was chances that if there was ever going to be World War III, there would be indications ahead of time of special kinds of Soviet activity. And that's why you spied on them, because there might be indications of big movements or unusual activities, and you're looking for unusual patterns as an analyst. And if those things happened, then you might be able to warn the U.S. from what you're seeing ahead of what anybody else was doing, so we could prepare and respond. So that was sort of the general mission back then. And one of those that actually happened was, that's when Yugoslavia broke up. Remember, some of the satellite states were breaking up at the time?
Yeah.
Yugoslavia was one of them. And I just happened to be on watch at one moment where one of our criteria was, if there was certain kinds of activity you detected, you had less than 10 minutes to notify the White House and senior.
And you had to make a decision.
Yeah, and you're a
like
22, 23-year-old ensign or lieutenant JG in the Navy. You're in charge of like 90 people, and it's totally on you at 2 o'clock in the morning to decide if you're going to call the White House.
Okay, so I just want to stop right there for a second, because we have, not uncommonly, we'll hire employees, and something will happen. It's happened with everybody where it's that they don't show up for work, they whatever, blah 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 blah. And the response usually is, "They're just a kid. They're only 25." I'm like, he's 23, about ready to declare war.
Yeah, protecting you. Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah. So one of the things we would do is we would spy on some of the Soviet merchant ships, and you could hear them communicating. And it just so happened at the time, like a Soviet merchant ship was going up a river, I think, in Yugoslavia, and there were shots being fired on both sides. So this thing's right in the middle with rockets and shots being, flying over the ship to either side because the country was breaking up.
Oh my gosh.
So, I mean, by the book, if you studied your craft, you realize this kind of met that criteria. So you send this special kind of report, and boom, 10 minutes later, you're waking up the world on this.
Goodness.
Oh,
and you were there
goodness.
and part of that team that had to make that call.
Yep.
Oh my. That's wild. That really is. That's very intense. And it's kind of interesting that we've got Leif here talking about his experience and watching the breakup of the USSR firsthand. A few weeks ago, we had a guy on here named Rick Moore, and he was working the first rock concert in Moscow, and it occurred right before the fall of the wall.
Yeah,
And
Gorky Park.
Yeah, Gorky Park. And his interpretation of that as a civilian going over and taking those photos. So it's crazy to hear that.
That had to have been right around the same time.
Yeah,
Wow.
you'd be about 3 years after that, it sounds like, that you're watching the breakup of the countries, because I don't remember how many there were in the USSR, 19 or something like that. But
His experience sounded almost identical, except he was with a lot of women and cameras and rock stars and drinking.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you were holed up someplace alone at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
going.
Just exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
So after the call goes to Yugoslavia, then how much longer are you doing the cryptology work for the naval?
So I had the one tour after that in Hawaii, and then I decided to get out because from what I had just witnessed, it's the kind of career that as a young person you get to do all the cool things on the front end, and then on the back end, if you ever get to be a captain or an admiral, I think there's probably a lot of cool things that go along with that. But there's an entire mid-career, a good 10 years, that you're not really engaged with the operational side like I was enjoying. And you're probably more pouring coffee and buying time, to see if you can become a senior officer later. And that was just too long a run for me to go ahead and recommit to that. So as soon as my commitment was up, I realized that, I'd made a hard turn from who I was as a kid to what it took to, do well in a military environment with that type of responsibility. But all of my vocabulary at that point was strictly military. So I realized, I was missing a whole other chunk of more normal life.
How old are you at this point?
Probably 28.
Okay.
And so I went to business school as a way to both get more education and then also sort of de-speak myself on being too military about how the world worked and just get a bit of use grad school to get a bit of the college experience I thought I'd missed on.
Yeah, I can understand that. So that was going to be one of my questions is how did you prepare yourself for the exit? Do you think that it was a full year before you decided that you were going to call it quits in the military, that you had said, I need to lay my foundation to get into the corporate world?
Yep, it was exactly a year. So I basically put my notice in a year in advance to give enough notice to rotate out of that tour.
Does just kind of curious, does the Navy then approach you and say, Leif, you should really reconsider? Do they have kind of a exit interview process where they want to see if they can have some level of retention so that you don't walk away?
No, not in particular, although, it was more about trying to get you to go into the reserves after that then to sort of keep your skills relatively fresh, keep your clearance active, that type of thing. So this was also this was during the Clinton years at that point, and so they were also shrinking forces down. They were even paying a lot of pilots and stuff, big bonuses to leave, that type of thing. So it's very cyclical.
So you went and got your MBA after that at Tulane, correct?
Right.
All right. Well, we've only got a minute left before we can wrap up this half hour. We'll be back here in just a moment with Leif. But Ken, you gonna join the Navy?
Oh man, I just love the idea of a 23-year-old making a decision like that and him being on the front end and be able to tell people, I watched Yugoslavia go through this and I had to inform the U.S. and then suddenly CNN sitting there doing this. It's people forget what our veterans go through, what our soldiers do, and the responsibility put on them at a very young age.
Well, not only that, but the thing that I find most incredible about Leif and others like him that have started off with their military background training is you are forced into roles of maturation quickly. And it's no coincidence that people like Leif end up in positions like that they're in now, because you've basically, in the most formative of your years, been forced to make critical decisions, have confidence in doing it, and then moving forward. So no shock whatsoever.
Absolutely. So we're going to get into that and talk about how Elixinol brought a mind like yours in to legitimize the industry.
Absolutely. Okay, that's the end of this half hour. We'll see y'all in 2 minutes.
Why have thousands of aspiring authors teamed up with Christian Faith Publishing to publish their book? Because Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. We provide authors freedom and flexibility throughout the publishing process, professional book editing, award-winning design, and some of the highest royalty structures in the publishing industry. And as always, you will retain 100% of the rights to your book.
I was looking to find a company that I could trust, one that assisted in the editing process completely.
The most important qualities that I was looking for was a publisher who was honest and upfront, no hidden costs or fees, and owning the rights to my own work.
Christian Faith Publishing will publish, market, and sell your books in all major bookstores, online booksellers, as well as specialty Christian bookstores. Call for your free author submission kit.
800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. That's 800-978-4812.
Are you tired of high cable TV rates? Sign up for Dish today and get a $500 bonus offer while supplies last. Plus, lock in your price for 2 years guaranteed. Call All American Dish, your Dish authorized retailer now.
800-570-6630. 800-570-6630. That's 800-570-6630.
Offers require credit qualification, 24-month commitment, early termination fee, and e-auto pay. Restrictions apply. Call for details.
Are you tired of high cable TV rates? Sign up for Dish today and get a $500 bonus offer while supplies last. Plus, lock in your price for 2 years guaranteed. Call All American Dish, your Dish authorized retailer now.
800-570-6630. 800-570-6630. That's 800-570-6630.
Offers require credit qualification, 24-month commitment, early termination fee, and e-auto pay. Restrictions apply. Call for details.
All right, we are now back with the last half hour of the Gut Check Project, episode number 13, and just breaking down a very awesome career path from our own Leif Harrison, sitting to my right. And Leif, we just basically wrapped up a lot of what you had done in the Naval Academy, and you prepared to leave the Navy via gaining your MBA, Tulane University, and then you moved into the corporate world. Obviously, a lot different setting. How did you feel prepared as you embarked upon this this new level of career?
Yeah, I guess what I wasn't expecting was that sort of as a 30-year-old newly minted grad with an MBA, that then, I didn't expect to start at the bottom. So in the corporate world, I wasn't pouring coffee, but I wasn't too far away from that either. So I was just thrown in the world of spreadsheets and 15-hour days and just grinding on that. It's been a valuable tool that stayed with me since. So I appreciate that part of it. But it was a hard switch, and I think it's hard for a lot of vets. The responsibility and the teams that they led and what that meant as young people, and then you can start a pure civilian career, and it's just you as an individual. You've got some work assignments, and you're like, you know what for you helps make you better in that new role, but that doesn't mean that the new role understands any of that or even cares so much. So You know, sometimes at 30, I was like, at 20, I was doing way more than this.
Yeah, and your boss happens to be 22.
Right.
Yeah.
So, then, you know, there were a few initial stops along the way. Definitely got my feet wet. But as it turned out, this is funny. So when I joined the Navy at 17, I get a letter from my folks like a month later, and they're like, we quit our jobs. We're starting our own business. I was like, okay. I mean, they never gave me any clue about that. As soon as I was out of the house, I was an only child. I was out. They just reset. So like I said, my dad was a pretty brilliant mechanical engineer. He'd actually invented a device, a new technology for railroads to help them predictively have a better idea when a train might derail.
Oh.
And so he could actually analyze wheels on a train as it went down the track and tell you, you know what, that wheel's about to go bad. And when it does, it's going to cause the entire train to derail.
Oh, geez.
So he co-invented that technology and then started his own business. And my mom, who also happened to be an MBA at the time, the two of them opened up shop and turned that technology into their business for the next 20 years.
Oh, my gosh.
No, that's actually really impressive.
Whenever I hear any business, I think about marketing. How do you get that out there? What do you do? And I just, I don't know your dad, but like one of those like weird commercials where it's like, are you worried about your train derailing? We have the technology to prevent that.
Yeah, they
well,
obviously
it's just a big enough business that when you're the only ones in the world with a patented technology to deal with it, there's enough there to keep the lights on.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's too bad they weren't able to use YouTube clips to make that happen and just shoot their own commercials.
So what was interesting is that was the classic case of it took 10 years to be an overnight success.
Always does.
Always
does.
By the time it was a success, they had grown just enough that it gave me an opportunity to go home and help them on the family business for like 7 years and actually have some skills to actually make a difference.
Wow.
That's awesome. So then you did a couple other jobs. You were in sales. What was your favorite? So I'm seeing here you were with a controller. You were a manager at Jepson, which is a Boeing company.
Correct.
And you were with them for 3 years. And then how did you end up at Elixinol? So the whole reason why we put this foundation of you is because you have this complex background. You bring a lot of value to a company like Elixinol that recently went public about a year ago or so, right?
Yep.
And so they sought you out. You bring a ton of value to this company.
Yeah, I think I have a pattern of kind of I hit it hard going in. I like all the learning that you have to do, and then maybe I get a little bit bored once I think I've figured something out, and I move on to the next thing. The difference here, though, is that this is an aspect of business I've never seen before. There is, in all the other work I've ever done, you've had to beat the phones to help keep the business alive and try to grow it. Here, I don't call anybody. They call us. So there is so much demand for what's going on here. Can we partner with you? That I sit here and have the only luxury I've ever had in my life of sifting through opportunities and deciding we like this opportunity, but we're going to let that one sit aside. I don't have to chase everything and then take my chances. There can be a lot more selective.
You're like the pretty girl in Tinder.
Right.
Left,
Yeah,
left,
lots of swiping left.
Right. So I think with that is there's a responsibility to get it right, and it's also to not repeat mistakes of the past, which is, it looks to me in my view of the world that we've had some moments like tech in the late 90s, but everybody knows how that kind of turned out and flamed out, and it was run by a lot of people who, if you just kind of took a little bit of look under the hood, there wasn't a whole lot of there, and then finally reality caught up with them in the market. This has that kind of fever in it on the front end, but we're trying to professionalize the market so that there are actually legitimate winners in this space, because they've brought in the kinds of right people to work what I call, to me, it's like the phase two. Phase one was the startup back in 2014 when the Farm Bill passed and gave a little bit of breathing room to what you could do with hemp. Phase two was the second Farm Bill last December of 2018 that said, okay, this can be more commercialized. And now that it's commercialized, it is drawing the attention of a lot of other sort of multi-career path professionals who've gleaned a lot of experiences in a lot of other aspects of formal business to come into this world with marketing, operations, finance, business development, sales, all of that. They have enough wisdom they've gleaned along the way to say, these are tools and practices that work and these aren't. And they're sort of helping the entrepreneurs that worked in phase one to now have processes in place, certifications in place, formal plans in place, take money from the markets and with a fiduciary responsibility and a mindset to manage those people's money.
That's why I think your background is so important. Using the term fiduciary responsibility. Mm-hmm. And you said, I did spreadsheets in this job. I went back. I did this startup with my mom and dad. I did the whole thing at 23, having this. You come into this thing, and every time, the reason why I wanted to have you on the show is because when we talk to you, you talk very different. Everybody else is like, let's strike while the iron's hot. Let's just do this. You're like, let's slow everything down. Let's build a structure, a framework. Let's build a long-term plan. That's why I want to science it up. That's why you want to use the processes, standard operating procedure to get this from point A to wherever you want to go. And I think that the key to somebody being really successful is being able to link these different memories that you've developed along the way and implement this. And I do believe that there's going to be one or two major players in the end, and Elixinol is going to be one of them.
Something else, though, about Leif's movement, I think, Leif, it just really emboldens your position on taking those approaches in this particular industry. If we just back up time 2 decades ago, and you thought of someone who may have left a large financial group or something like that, and they'd moved into internet or some type of internet company, you would think, man, that is a crazy move. What a wild move from a standard industry or a banking industry over to a frontier. But you wouldn't think anything about that today. If someone came from AOL and moved over to, I don't know, Dean Witter or something like that, you wouldn't think anything of it. You just say, oh, that makes sense. That's an established industry. It only makes sense. They're probably going to do some kind of application. I think where you're at is one of the new frontiers that we'll look back in 10 or 15 years and go, that's a very established industry.
Well, let me just throw this at you. As business development, what is your 6-month, 1-year goals in this industry that is just the Wild West right now?
Well, it's trying to get other decision makers to consider saying no for the first time, because they've had to say, like any entrepreneur, they've had to say yes to everything just to keep the doors open. Mm-hmm. And I respect that. But now you can be a little more selective, and you need to be, because it's not necessarily just your money anymore at stake. Mm-hmm. And you have to be mindful of that. You have to now, instead of worrying about, am I going to get to next, to the fall, it's more like, what could our destination look like in 3 years? What should it look like in 5 years? And there's enough white space of opportunity in all of this that let's start making some bets now that aren't necessarily going to pay off immediately. But we think as the industry shakes itself out, these are the kinds of things you'll look back on and go, man, I'm glad we set that up 3 years ago, because look what it did for us today.
I think, and hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn here, but would one of those be practical application and research? I mean,
100%. We spend, we are intentionally focused on areas like medical professionals and education to that audience, who can then act like internal champions, like KBMD, to their audiences about the benefits of CBD. And at the same time, just always trying to answer the question, what can we do to bring a new user in who has questions? How can we honor their questions and educate them in a way that they feel like they can make a smart decision for themselves? Those are two challenges I don't think we go 1 or 2 days without really being conscious of.
On that same note, I received an email from a friend who sent me an article from Supermarket News trying to address some of the top concerns that retailers and customers have. And one of the questions that I'm looking at right here is, I hear that a lot of hemp CBD products are testing poorly. What about brand and retailer concerns about supply integrity? And I think that's one of the things that you have to differentiate yourself, because there are a lot of people talking a lot of crap. And retailers want to be able to explain the story to the consumer that comes in. The consumer wants to know that what they're getting. So the brand itself, when you say 3 and 5 year, when you become the Kleenex of the industry, and that's what we want to be with Atrantil, we want to be the Kleenex of gut health. It's the same thing. Eventually, that name sticks out because of the integrity.
Right. So, like on the retail side, because of the last Farm Bill, the large retail chains, the national chains, don't want to be too late to the party. Maybe not necessarily the first one out of the gate, but probably not the third or fourth one either. I mean, they're really looking for the sweet spot. So we are constantly in front of audiences like this, constantly making the case with very specific messaging that they can then turn around to their own decision makers and repeat that messaging as internal champions. I mean, it's a sales process that works, but it's also, we need to keep it anchored in truth and integrity at all stages. And we have found that whether we've won opportunities or lost opportunities, we clearly have gained the respect of audiences we've spoken to who say, you know what, yeah, we might have gone with the other guy, but we have a feeling we don't know if this will work, but we have laid such a baseline down of reputation that I think it's only a matter of time before they come home to somebody who's going to be there for the long term. And then the long term ties into the supply question. So testing, bad results, all of that stuff. It's a game that Elixir has never played. It's always spent whatever money it's needed to spend to get the independent third-party testing it needs and publishing those results from day one as soon as a product hits the market, that what's in that bottle or what's in that tube is what the label says it is. And then here's the independent third-party test that you can go to the website, click on and prove that's what that is. So we can't fix the rest of the world. All we can do is set a standard that says at the end of the day, this is who we are. And I guarantee you that the larger corporations in the world do not want to mess around with anything on their supplier side that doesn't meet those standards. So it's the certifications, it's the processes, it's getting corporate to some degree, which can be a bad word to people. But again, it's really about applying lessons that matter across time. And when you're in a phase 2 growth phase, these are the new responsibilities you have to take on, which is why you have to go outside at times to sort of professionalize the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you just said, I thought was just amazing.
That makes sense. Do you find the opportunities with other technically competitors, but probably other good actors in the business, is using them as allies, is something as y'all develop this frontier that they become, y'all basically lean on each other to make some of these advances?
I think we're early enough right now that we're all still competitors because there's a lot of ground to stake out. However, I think the markets over time will act like they do. And when they do, even the competitors are going to find that sort of a co-opetition will be the mechanism by which if they're not going to merge, they need to coexist. So like Pepsi and Coke will coexist. Sure. There may only end up being 2 or 3 big players when this is all said and done. Elixir is going about it a little differently. We're a little more global in nature and at the expense of quarterly by quarterly profit performance. But we're playing the long game, and I don't know that anyone else is to the degree that we are.
Mm-hmm.
So did you find that going into a new frontier industry where previously doing corporate work right out of the Navy, you said that you were probably at a lower level job than anything you'd had exposure with in the Navy, and you kind of had to work your way up. And then, of course, you parlay that into the different positions that you took that led you to Elixinol and joining the hemp industry. Do you find that kind of being on a frontier has been kind of a thrust back or a little bit more of a hybrid setting?
I am drawing on skills that I thought I'd long since forgotten.
That's kind of what I'm picking up.
It is, you need a bit of a Wild West mentality, but you need to remember where you came from. You need to be disciplined when other people necessarily aren't. You need to learn to say no in a room when they've not heard that before. You can't chase everything down, but if you do commit to chase, then you chase it the right way. You chase it with an engagement on the front end and the middle and the back end with well-prepared thoughts, well-prepared documents, well-researched, well-argued. And it's the workload is higher than I've ever seen it in any job I've ever been before, but you can win if you just have the endurance to keep at it.
So you're working harder now than you ever have?
Ever have.
Wow.
It just seems like that whenever you were in the Navy and talking about your naval experience and then going over and listening to the Russians, that you had really critical decisions that had to be made. And then suddenly you're thrust into this corporate world where lots of it has kind of been done multiple times over. And so you everybody kind of, to some level, not that you didn't work, but you work where your sandbox is. And now you're back into a wild industry where a lot of people are waiting on you to make a big decision.
It's a constant tension between winging it on what your gut says and making decisions based on sound information. And that tension is always there. But I think whoever in this industry dials that in correctly is going to come out on top.
Yeah, that is really interesting, because the Cold War right now for the hemp industry is just the right permissions to be allowed and for the right things to happen from banking.
Yeah. Do you ever get frustrated when you see just so many companies, MLMs, people just making claims, people doing the things that you're purposely not doing? You're doing things on the up and up. I mean, is that just white noise to you? Do you just not care?
It is white noise, and because there's so much workload, I don't have much bandwidth left to even pay attention to any of that. And that's probably a good thing, because it would probably drive me nuts if I did.
It's always funny because whenever I put any of my patients on CBD and they're like, oh, well, I'm on this and it costs this. I'm like, how many milligrams? And then you realize there's all this gamesmanship in the pricing. There's gamesmanship in the marketing. You have no idea if they don't even list the CBD, milligrams, all that stuff. Do you have a certificate of analysis? No. And you have to go through and explain all that. And I'm like, this is an interesting industry. When it becomes standardized, when we had Chris Husong on, where he said, I think that we need to change the label. We need to make it so it's much more obvious what the milligrams are and where it is, which companies have COAs, which these things. Because I think the industry's changing almost on a monthly basis.
That's critical part, and I think it's actually the first of two parts. The second part is it appears expensive, but compared to what? What other pills are you on?
Oh.
What other things are you trying to target? How much is all that stuff costing you when you're taking a regimen of 8 or 10 or 12 different things, physician recommended or not, to basically not cure what ails you, but just really manage what ails you? Well, here's this other thing that if you look at it on sort of a value proposition, a cost per effect, I am hard pressed, even just from a putting an old financial analyst hat on, I am hard pressed to figure out a way that you aren't actually saving money in the long run by paying for the high end quality full spectrum CBD, given what you then get to set aside that's been your regimen in a whole bunch of other areas with side effects and compounding effects. And really, my wife is a disabled vet, injured in Army training, and she's had multiple surgeries. If you're not waiting for the VA, you're just given bags and bags of hard drugs. And all it's doing is masking a problem, creating 4 other ones to get your mind off something central that's not being fixed. So again, if people are going to talk about the cost of the high quality, high proven CBD, then I just say compared to what?
Well, what's interesting is when Consumer Labs did a whole analysis, and the Elixinol, actually milligram to milligram in quality, is one of the most cost-effective CBD milligram to milligram. They did a whole analysis on this. Great article on that. Getting back to your talk about what is the actual cost, well, that's what I deal with. When I have patients, I have the luxury of having somebody that we diagnose with ulcerative proctitis, and a drug called Canasa costs $1,500 a month, and we're going to end up publishing a case series here shortly about how we have shown both endoscopic and pathologic remission using essentially whatever it would be. At the time we did 1 month, so for $79, we put you into remission with that.
And they had real relief.
Yeah, and this is not a disease claim. This is just, here is the endoscopic picture, here is the pathologic picture. If you cannot go get those drugs, then we have an alternative solution.
That brings up another point. We were talking just yesterday, that article that McWilliams sent over that brought up the perceptions of what a retailer has to take into consideration. And Leif, obviously handling the business end for Elixinol, I'm sure these are challenges that you come up against. But Ken, do you have any of those that kind of leapt out at you whenever we were reading through that?
Well, it's a very interesting article because it was, the article stated it's 7 retailer and brand owner questions answered about hemp CBD. And, you know, one of the simple ones is, how is it made? And so it goes into a little bit about that. That's not what we have you here for. We're talking about some of these different, the legal positions that's changing. I mean, from a business development perspective, when you suddenly have a bill change or a state adopt something, you have to pivot and move that way or move accordingly. And that's not an easy thing from a business development standpoint. You've got so many different things. Well, it's like the wind changing on your boat.
Right.
I mean, you just have to adapt.
Yeah, we might not even really be in the first 10% of this whole journey yet. So I'm not a retail specialist, but you know, I do have a general sense that people walk into a Target or a Walmart and there's price points in their head because of their experience of being in Targets and Walmarts. So, you know, something that might be above $40 in those venues is sticker shock, because they're just not using to spend anything more than that when they walk in there. So there is a challenge that to get on retail shelves, you know, we're either shrinking the bottle down to a $40 price point, or we're giving them the power of volume, but maybe at sticker shock for the person that's walking in. So that's another challenge in the mind shift that has to occur, that if you're talking about being proactive about your own wellness and then comparing that to what your alternatives are in the pain management space, that this is actually a value way out, both in health and cost, to manage your own future. But we're probably still a long way there from having that be a common mind share.
That's pretty wild, because if you're able to put it, and you use this word last hour, which is context, put into context what cost is, it's far more than cash out of your pocket. Quality of life, the one thing that you can value more than anything is going to be time. And if your time is high quality, that's good time spent. But if your time, unfortunately, is spent in pain or where you cannot enjoy your life, your quality of life is low, that's what we're all trying to avoid. That's what we want to escape for not only yourself, but for your loved ones. And if you can just use a little bit of cash to buy a lot more good QOL, quality of life, it's worth it. And that level of exchange is what people don't know when they see that sticker shock. And Ken, you had that issue with patients at the clinic. At first, when we were using the Elixinol, once you determined it worked best in your patients, we had the 4-ounce bottle. And the sticker shock of it was like, I'd love to try it, but it's a little bit hard for me to grab. So actually they paid a little bit more per milligram to get a smaller step in, and now they that's the KBMD model, and that, you know, people do, and when they get that. And so now we have a little built-in deal where if somebody goes to KBMD KBMDhealth.com, you know, we build it in so that I understand that when I put people on this, I tell my patients, I said, look, I need you to commit to this. Don't try it once and say it didn't work. Same thing with Atrantil. Don't take one tablet, go, oh, it didn't work. Right.
Because we do the same thing with pharmaceuticals. All the studies have always shown, whenever we do a study on anything, that it can take up to X amount of weeks to work, blah, blah, blah. So I tell everybody, I mean, think of your endocannabinoid system like a sponge. If it's really dry, you may require longer and more amounts to really saturate it. Once you're saturated, you're going to feel like a new person, and depending on what those issues are. The problem is this white noise where everybody says it fixes this, it fixes that. We know, and an hour ago, we talked about leaky gut. Not saying that it fixes leaky gut. I'm telling you a mechanism in a research model, how it actually binds to certain receptors to do this. Hence, when somebody comes back and says, hey, I feel better, I believe that the combination of Atrantil and KBMD, Elixinol branded hemp oil is meant to work together. And that's what's really cool because I see that success, especially in my Crohn's and colitis people.
I see it whenever they come through for the scopes and they give us the report that I feel better, or we certainly can't mention names, but we had the one gentleman who suffered from Crohn's for a long time, who had been anemic for years, and suddenly now he's not. And the only things that had changed, it wasn't diet. He'd already been adhering to that. He's essentially just...
Yeah, my only disappointment with it now is that my staff has gotten so good. And obviously we take time to do the show and stuff. And so I have my physician assistant, Megan, who's gotten good enough that now when I see people, I was like, hey, let me tell you about CBD. And they're like, yeah, I'm on it. I'm like, oh. So I lose the ability to do the whole, I'm like, oh, Megan's getting pretty good at putting people on this. Okay. That's, because it's a little bit of a dopamine increase when I get a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Leif, believe it or not, that's already been 2 hours. And I can't thank you enough for riding your horse all the way down from Colorado to join us here in Texas. What did you have? You had a comment about the air conditioning in our little studio here. What was that?
That it's like Ice Station Zebra. Classic old Navy Rock Hudson movie.
Yeah. Well, I don't have that one in my viewing pleasure.
Usually we tend to quote movies, but yeah, I haven't seen that one.
To pull from. You did list Tombstone as one of your favorite movies also. So.
Classic.
Yeah, that one. Ken, what's your favorite Tombstone line? Is it a Doc Holliday?
I'll be a Huckleberry.
Yeah, that's most people's go-to move. Yeah. Mine is, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me.
Well, here at the end of the show, there's also the one where he just says, well, bye.
Well, Leif, thank you so much for coming down. I love the fact that Elixir's grabbed you from the corporate world, and you got your work cut out for you.
Episode 13's in the books. Leif, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. We will see y'all next week.
Right on. Great job.